The US and China are fighting a war. It's not a war that you can really see, and it's not a traditional battlefield war with soldiers, at least not yet. This is a war that's being fought in government offices and company boardrooms. It's a war that's being fought with rules and regulations, and it's meant to stop rivals from getting their hands on the most important technology in the world, microchips. You might hear them called semiconductors, microchips, or integrated.
Brakti Yahawah, Brakti Yahawashai, Brakti Yahawah, Brakti Yahawashai, Brakti Yahawah, Brakti Yahawashai, KAL HALAL YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM Rakatash. This is another digital epistle to the 12 tribes of Israel. Double honors to the elders and apostles, who've been laboring in this truth, and who were well, and honors to any brother, pushing on the likewise doctrine and who believes in the land, and especially to any brother or sister, who believes in the likewise doctrine, Revelation 13:16. He causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a ark in the right hand or in their foreheads.
Integrated circuits, these are all the same thing. We're just gonna call them chips, microchips, tiny pieces of metal that are magic and that run our world. This is a big thing that's happening in geopolitics right now. And I want to help you understand the stakes of this new conflict between the US and China. It's going to be the center of global attention for years to come. And what we're seeing right now is how boring trade regulations and business rules can escalate to something that can impact your everyday life, because your life depends on chips, whether you know it or not. In fact, let me show you. Everything has silicon in it. Anything that has any technological smartness to it is a product of silicon. Sorry, Tom. Oh, and it's not just like the usual suspects techie things. Yep, microchip. My refrigerator, silicon. My microwave, silicon. Nah, I'm just playing with you. This doesn't have silicon in it. This is just a few little things I found around the office, but like silicon is in your refrigerator, your microwave, like it is in your digital clock. It is what makes our world go round. I mean, we are speaking through silicon right now. Like you are watching this on the internet that is made possible because of silicon on a screen that is being fired by a silicon chip. Like everything is silicon in our world. Besides like the forest or something, or like, analog cameras. So microchips make our economy possible, but it's not just tech. It's not just the consumer tech. It's also military. The military needs microchips. They need microchips for weapon systems. They need microchips for intelligence. They need microchips for AI. They need microchips to stay ahead of their rivals. Microchips represent geopolitical power because they represent military power. That's something to just keep in mind as we go through the story.
House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi is in Taiwan tonight. China.
What did he say? They represent military power.
Is already responding.
We lead the world in future industries, protect our national security. We're in the middle of
Daniel 12:4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up thy words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased.
one of the most fundamental changes in the character of war in the history of mankind.
Hey, pause. I feel really strongly that the internet is a place where you can learn to level up your professional skills. I learned all my skills on the internet. That is how I know how to animate and edit and film and do all of these things. The sponsor of today's video also believes this. Thank you, Scalar, for sponsoring today's video. Scalar is a place where you can go and level up your skills as a programmer or engineer. Scalar is a short-term accelerator program. It's like 8 to 11 months, and it's meant to enhance the coding skills, like software Scalar, that will accelerate you, that will help you get in the right doors, and that will give you the skills that you need to your skills on the internet want in this industry. So if you are a software professional who's ready to grow their career, it kind of looked like this. In 1959, the US was about to get very lucky. Computers at the time were becoming a thing, but they kind of looked like this. Tons of wires connecting everything, all of them sending little precise electronic signals to each other to solve tedious, complex math problems. It was clunky, it was inefficient, it wasn't very special yet. But then 2 American engineers that were working separately at 2 totally different companies had a very similar idea. And the idea was to get rid of this, all these wires. There was this new technology that had cropped up called a transistor. It was like a really precise, reliable on and off switch. It allows you to control pulses of electricity super precisely. But at first, transistors looked like this. They were big and clunky, lots of parts. So the idea was, what if we start carving these little on and off switches onto a material called silicon? It's like a super abundant metal silver-like material inside of Earth's crust. But it's actually a horrible conductor of electricity. If you mix silicon with other elements, it conducts electricity really well. It is a semiconductor of electricity. Exactly what they needed to precisely control the flow of electricity very accurately. No more clunky long wires. Let's just carve our little transistor switches onto this silicon chip, a single circuit. That way we can fit a lot more into one place, all close together. So that's what they did. And then the world changed forever.
With the transistor, man has gone far toward matching some of the capacity of the human brain.
Okay, real quick aside here, we're gonna get to the geopolitics and stuff, but I was so curious about one thing. Why does being able to precisely control the on and off switch, or like the flow of electricity, do anything to change the world? Well, it turns out, this is where my mind bends a little bit. Just stick with me here. So transistors can turn on and off, and they send a signal that results in one of two things, a 1 or a 0 when it gets to the other side. Super boring and useless if you just have one little transistor sending a 1 or a 0. But if you have 1,000 of these switches, all sending little signals in the right order, suddenly you have something that kind of resembles a little brain, firing signals in a coordinated system that can actually solve logical mathematical problems and literally remember things. This is kind of how our brain works. It's pulses, lots of pulses. And now we're talking about computing. This is how computers work. The more pulses of electricity you can control, the more you can do with technology. And suddenly, there's a new gold rush in the United States. But the gold is now silicon, and the rush is to put as many of these little switches onto that silicon chip as possible, so that we can make our technology do more and more sophisticated stuff. And now people have smarter clocks, and TVs, and radios, and video games, and calculators. Things that you can hold in your hand and press a bunch of buttons, and suddenly, the silicon chip is solving math problems for you instantaneously. What is happening? This is magic. Oh, and it's not just tech bros in the 60s who are loving this. The US military and NASA are first in line to get their hands on these new chips. They dream of using them for more sophisticated weapons, or going to the moon.
Good hair always makes a splash.
Your hair is amazing.
Chips were becoming a currency for national power. We gotta protect them, thinks the USA. Luckily, the USA didn't really have to do much to protect them at first. They were killing it. They were the global leaders of this chip making stuff. Every year, US companies crammed more and more transistors onto this little piece of silicon. More calculations. And it's not just tech bros in the 60s who are loving this. The US military and NASA are first in line to get their hands on these new chips. They dream of using them for more sophisticated weapons, or going to the moon. Chips were becoming a currency for national power. We gotta protect them, thinks the USA. Luckily, the USA didn't really have to do much to protect them at first. They were killing it. They were the global leaders of this chip making stuff. Every year, US
Daniel 4:17, and this manner is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and he giveth to whosoever he will, and he setteth the basis of men over it, man. And that's the Lord, man. He set the lowest man, gave him this understanding, preserved him throughout all the nations and their rulerships, and gave him his rulership to be able, to be worshipped by these nations.
Companies crammed more and more transistors onto this little piece of silicon. More calculations per second. More and more companies are now cropping up to make dreams come true with their new magical microchips. Lots of this action was happening right here in Central California, in a valley that would soon take on the name of the material that enabled all this magic to happen. By the mid-1980s, they were carving nearly 300,000 little on and off switches onto a piece of silicon. Oh, and look, it's Steve Jobs and Bill Gates.
Yes.
They're using these more sophisticated silicon chips to change the course of history. Home computing, color televisions, more advanced satellites, and smaller electronic devices of all kinds. There's a revolution happening. And over the next 30 years, the number of transistors that they can fit onto a piece of silicon starts to become ridiculous. And it's like the 90s, and these things are getting faster and smaller, and now humans have computers in their homes that are more advanced than the ones that were used to land on the moon.
Not only do they play the typical computer games that all the kids enjoy, but their curiosity for learning has skyrocketed.
And look, it's even smaller now. It fits in your pocket.
And we are calling it iPhone.
None of this is possible without these little magical brains made of silicon. Okay, but then a problem arises, and it has to do with these. These look like just factories where they make microchips, right? No, these are not just factories. We have a special name for these. They're called fabs, and they are a central part of this story. Because listen, cramming tens of millions of transistors onto a piece of metal-like substance from the Earth is hard to begin with. But as the number of transistors continues to double and double and double, making them becomes incredibly complicated. I mean, look at these operations. This is inside of a fab, and the reason why it looks like they're doing open heart surgery here is because even a single speck of dust that gets into this fab and onto one of these chips can totally ruin it. So yeah, it was American companies who are designing and making chips, but every year they have to spend more and more on these tedious fabs, these factories on steroids. They're getting really spendy, like billions of dollars spendy. Meanwhile, an ocean away, you've got a couple of economic miracles happening in all of these countries in East Asia that are rapidly developing, and they want in on this microchip gold rush. One of these countries is Japan.
Second Ezra 15:46, and thou Asia that are partaker in the hope of Babylon, and art thou glory of her persons.
where a bunch of new tech companies were getting really good at making chips, and they could make them and sell them for way cheaper than the US. Oh, and by the way, this was with the help of the Japanese government, who's like subsidizing this. Governments love microchips. That's gonna be a theme in this video. So the US is hating this. They're kind of freaking out that Japan is getting in on all the chip gold rush. They got to do something about it. So it's 1987, and the US government basically says, no more Japanese.
And they're freaking out. Second Ezra 15:43. And they shall go steadfast onto Babylon, making her afraid. They're afraid. Now, they're the ones who are selling this technology. And now they're afraid because they took it. They took it to the next level, man. They shall come to her and besiege her. The stars and all the wrath shall they pour onto her. Then shall the dust and the smoke go up to heaven, the nuclear destruction, the nuclear ash. You know? And they that be about her shall bewail her, and they shall remain under her, shall do her service unto them who have, unto them that have put her in fear. And thou, Asia, that are partaker in Babylon, and our glory to, and our glory to her persons, who woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made herself like unto her, and have decked thy daughters in whoredoms, that they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. Thou hast followed her that is hated in all her inventions. Therefore, saith BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, pestilence, and to waste thy houses with destruction. And we see this, man. They're afraid, but no matter what, just like Moab, and either way, man, nothing America could really do about Taiwan. They're gonna try to defend it, to try to get as much, microchip, get as much, use possible. But there's nothing they could do against, China. A lot of these people don't wear their traditional garb anymore. Even though they, like all nations, they were darker skinned. Now they didn't discriminate against, the black people and the Israelites, who really formulated that on that whole, who really civilized them. Man, we see what they do now. We see all the abominations they eat. they without the organization of Jake and the Israelites, there wasn't in them rice fields. But especially a lot of Jake, we was done over there. Jake was the original inhabitants over there, man. Even Ammon, Moab, Inu. I believe those are Israelites, man. You see that the Japanese have such an honor code with dealing with their people, but when dealing with outsiders, man, treat them just like the Northern Kingdom was did. Their daughters aren't wearing their traditional garb. All the inventions, man. They're supposedly making artificial suns. Really, Moab, Babylon Part 2, Communist Babylon, and the Taiwanese. They're just trying to be a nationalist Babylon. And they desire to commit for them, just like the chips. We get everything from Moab, and it'd be cheap, it'd be breaking, it's useless. A lot of this obsolescence, man. But they finesse, man, when they decided to, let look at all these amazing cities America used to have. Beautiful skylines, Detroit. They all pulled out, man. The money that used to go to develop America is not just sitting in the bankers' accounts. As they use Moab, they would use Asia for cheap labor. They use Ammon. So that's why the Lord cut them off, man. Trying to one child balls, all these type of things, to compete, man. And they're dead too. Yeah, they got Yeah, they have a better running system. Yeah, their government has more control, but anti-life, watch out. And just know, when all these commercial obstacles with these countries, man, all these issues, they gotta go to war. So that's all they can do, man. And they're gonna get judged too, man. They cut our people off, man.
Chips, they put a 100% tax on Japanese chips coming into the US, which not surprisingly just crushes Japan's chip industry. Too bad, so sad, Japan, said the president at the time, who was, wait, what the hell, Ronald Reagan? The prophet of free markets and free trade? What's going on here?
Our aim is to increase our national wealth so all will have more.
Well, turns out that chips are really important. So important, in fact, that Mr. Free Market Economics abandoned his principles to protect American chips. This is a theme. We're going to see a lot more of it. Okay, so let's move on. Meanwhile,
when it comes to politics and parties, ain't no such thing as real principles.
Our Asian economic miracle country is growing super fast and wants to get in on this. But they also are looking over Japan and they're like, we don't want the US to squash us for trying to compete with them. So if we can't beat them, let's join them. Oh, and this is a really important foreshadow here. Taiwan is looking over here at their neighbor China, who's also getting really rich and more serious about making good on their lifelong promise to eventually invade Taiwan and, quote, reunite it with China. Kind of scary. So in the back of Taiwan's mind, they're also kind of looking for a way to get the West to protect them. So they made a bet. A freaking brilliant bet that solved all their problems at once. At the time, a bunch of engineers in Taiwan were actually leaving Taiwan to go to the US, to go to university there, and then to actually work for US companies in the cutting-edge microchip economy. Texas Instruments, Intel. So the first thing the Taiwanese government does is lure them back. They guarantee them jobs, they pay for their travel costs, they give them tax breaks to create companies. Their goal is to create a Silicon Valley in Taiwan, and it totally works. It's like a reverse brain drain. Thousands of engineers return to Taiwan to start companies and to help build the microchip industry in Taiwan. And one of those engineers is the one who actually changed the game. This guy named Morris Chang. He had the best idea of all of them. He had seen that American chip makers were hating how much money they had to invest in these fabs, these really complicated factories to make microchips. His idea was, instead of trying to compete with the United States in the chip industry and get crushed like Japan did, let's become their friend. Let's solve their problem. We won't design chips, we won't make devices, we won't make the software, we will just make the chips themselves. We will become the masters of fabs, the tedious, expensive job of getting more and more transistors onto a piece of silicon. So he starts a company called Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. Super promising and creative name, Morris. And the government of Taiwan is super into it, because now they can get in on a chip gold rush, and instead of pissing off the United States, they actually will solve the US's problem, and crucially, make the US reliant on them. So now they have protection, a silicon shield to protect them from their big aggressive neighbor. The government gave nearly half of the startup costs to Morris Chang to start this new venture. They connected him to venture capital, and according to Chang,
Matthew 12:26. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand, man? How they use the communism, man. They use it to go to war, man. They use it to back one side of the country against each other, man, for their own benefit, man.
The Prime Minister of Taiwan even called a super rich Taiwanese investor to force him to invest in TSMC. Whoa, okay, yeah, wow. Like, you can see just how vital chips are. A little piece of silicon with a bunch of on and off switches. TSMC was basically a state-owned company from the beginning. So yeah, Taiwan's now in the game, and semiconductors are now becoming a geopolitical bargaining chip. A geopolitical bargaining chip. I kind of regret it. Sorry.
It's just
crunchy for you and melty for you. You pick two and get more at Panera.
Feel protected under our roof with auto and home coverage at the right price. American Family Insurance.
Part of geopolitics. But meanwhile, in business world, in Silicon Valley, they're loving this Taiwan situation. Because now, instead of having to do all of this expensive, tedious fab stuff, they can just do the design and the software and the business side of it, and they can just ship it off to TSMC, and they do the rest, taking on the expensive, tedious work of maintaining their fabs and keeping them up to the cutting edge, which requires billions of dollars every year. Like, to keep some perspective, look at this graph. This is the number of transistors on a piece of silicon. By 2010, they're now getting 1 billion transistors onto a piece of silicon the size of your fingernail. And the only way to do that is to make each one of these insanely small. So let's just take a moment to blow our own minds here. Each transistor is becoming smaller than a width of a human hair. Wait, no, sorry, that's actually way too big of a scale. A human hair is like 90,000 nanometers thick. We need to go smaller, like a red blood cell. Wait, no, that's still too big, 7,000 nanometers. Okay, a virus, something that's not even totally alive, it's so small. Wait, that's 14 nanometers, still too big. I mean, we are getting into insane scales here. IBM recently revealed the chip with transistors that are 2 nanometers thick, making them literally smaller than a strand of DNA. So in these fabs, the reason it looks like this is because they have to figure out how to do this and to keep doing it and keep making it smaller and smaller, providing the world with the most advanced chips. And this is why we have nice things. Your entire world revolves around what is happening on these little strips of silicon. More and more US chip companies don't actually have fabs. They design them, they do all the software and the machinery and the selling and the business, but the actual making of the chip happen in Taiwan. But as 92% of all advanced chips are now made in Taiwan, what this means is that the US is completely reliant on TSMC, basically. And finally, we're getting to the conflict. This is where China becomes really important. Because China, the most populous country, is suddenly very rich, and they want new tech too. So they become actually a giant customer of all these chips, buying 40% of all the chips in the world, meaning that they are now reliant on the US, who is reliant on Taiwan, to design and make their chips. So let's look at the modern chip industry as it all comes together, which is going to set the stage for how this conflict is playing out today. Here's a very simplified version of the supply chain. Again, very simplified, it's just insane, I'm not going to go into the full thing. The US is the one that manufactures the machines, the software, and the designs. Japan makes metals and chemicals for chips. The Netherlands makes this crazy UV laser machine that is used to carve the chips, and Taiwan, crucially, does the expensive, tedious job of actually making the chip. Almost all of the most advanced chips in the world are made in Taiwan. And then you have China, who is the giant customer in all of this. They're the ones who are buying more and more chips to grow their economy. I mean, look at this beautiful supply chain. You've got a bunch of countries that are involved now. Everyone has a part to play, and everyone depends on each other for chips. Globalization is great. Economic interdependence is a recipe for peace and mutual prosperity. Right? I mean, it used to be. But there's something else happening with the supply chain that might be hard to see in this diagram, which is that the US is still the kingpin of this system. They're the most important player. They have the most important ingredients, the best designs, the best software, and the most machines to make chips. Taiwan, their bestie, has the second most important ingredients in all of this, the fabs that actually make the chips. China, on the other hand, is in a position of weakness. Their role is basically the big hungry chip consumer, totally reliant on their frenemy, the United States, and their annoying neighbor, Taiwan, who they want to invade, but now they're reliant on for cutting edge chips. And what's at stake here for China? Well, it's not just their economy. They don't want chips just so they can have a bunch of cool tech. They want it because more and more, they need advanced chips for their military. So it's like the 2010s, software and the most machines to make chips. Taiwan, their bestie, has the second most important ingredients in all of this, the fabs that actually make the chips. China, on the other hand, is in a position of weakness. Their role is basically the big hungry chip consumer, totally reliant on their frenemy, the United States, and their annoying neighbor, Taiwan, who they want to invade, but now they're reliant on for cutting edge chips. And what's at stake here for China? Well, it's not just their economy. They don't want chips just so they can have a bunch of cool tech. They want it because more and more, they need advanced chips for their military.
Mark 3:27. No man can enter a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he will first bind the strong man, and then he will spoil his goods.
So it's like the 2010s, China's military is getting kind of scary, but it's not that scary, says the US. We're not that worried. We'll always be ahead of China when it comes to controlling the supply chain, and our military gets first dibs on all the best chips. China has no chance of catching up ever. And this is true. China was truly behind. They did not have the tech and the designs and the companies and the ability to make advanced chips. They were reliant on the United States. If China pissed off the US, they could just take away their chips. And now we have a rising conflict on our hands. China, this big superpower, is not going to let this happen. They realize that they have to do two things. Number one, they have to start making their own chips. They want to break free and stop relying on the US for anything, make their own chips so that the US doesn't have leverage over them. And number two, and deeply related, is they want to continue to build up their military, to modernize it, to build more warships and satellites and high-tech missiles and drones and eventually AI. All of this needs advanced chips, which they don't have. So they're like, we are going to make them on their own. And the US is like, good luck, China. You're so far behind. Good luck trying to figure out how to do this thing that we've spent the past 60 years figuring out how to do, make really expensive chips. Experts in software and machinery and fabs, like, you have no chance. So how is China going to catch up? Lucky for them, in China, there's a blurry line between businesses and the military. It's all kind of over.
Baruch 4:3. Give not thine honor to another, nor things that are profitable unto thee to a strange nation. If you truly want to stay ahead of your competition, don't even sell to them. By the traffic that Esau desires.
By the state. And also lucky for them, there are loads of US tech companies that are addicted to making money by selling microchip technology to China. So instead of inventing it themselves, they see an opportunity here. Need software and equipment for your new chip industry? Get it from the US. Need fancy chip designs and software? US companies have you covered. Need those high-tech chips produced for your military projects? American companies will sell them to you. And yes, TSMC in Taiwan will make them for you. Wait, China's using US technology to get ahead of US technology? What? In 2021, the Washington Post reported that China was building super advanced laboratories to test scary new weapons, including nukes. And guess what? They were using American semiconductor tech to do this. It started to become clear that American companies were selling tech and chips and software to Chinese tech companies that were actually just a front for the military. Wow. Yikes. The US chip industry is now allowing China to get ahead. This was starting to happen, but I think what really woke up the US is when this happened.
Huge step forward in China's military. China conducted 2 tests of a hypersonic missile system, technology that would allow it to fire a nuclear warhead faster than anyone else.
The U.S. does not currently have the ability to even track this weapon, much less defeat it.
US military generals wake up one morning to discover that China has just tested a new weapon, a missile that flew around the entire world, going 5 times the speed of sound, a mile a second. Oh, and it's really hard to see because it flies below radar range. It's super nimble, maneuverable, and has the ability to carry nukes. The US had been working on something similar, but China beat them to it by years. And it was American microchip technology that helped them build it. Oh, shit. Yikes.
Isaiah 54:16. Behold, I create the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that I bringeth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. And that's the Lord. The Lord set the base, man. The Lord gave the basis, man, the technology to outcompete everybody in these chips and putting these chips on these putting these many chips on the silicone, you know. But the Lord is a man of war. Ecclesiastes 10:8. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. And that's how the Lord deals with, man. He deals with kingdoms. He deals with one kingdom taking down another kingdom because that would be inconsequential. You know, as the Christians, that's why they love the. So a lot of G Christians, they want to act like they want to get the truth, but they really don't want it. It will interrupt you from getting the gospel, man. They love that whitewash Christianity because it's safe. It feels good that they can live whatever life they want. And the Antichrist, man, is he gonna come to doing miracles for 3 years? Not a miracle for. He gonna do the miracle for 3 years. So I just gotta not worship him, and I'm good. And I'll be teleported even before that even come the rapture. But no, you're gonna have to deal with the consequences of life, man. That's why reincarnation is important, and pretty much all the Eastern religions believe it, man. The world would be a better place, and the people who believe in reincarnation are richer because you're actually gonna care about the generations. You're not gonna be so ignorant because you're gonna come back into this. You're gonna be come back to set up.
Totally caught them off guard.
Says that US intelligence services had no idea that China was so far ahead.
It turns out that while the US government thought that they were running faster and that they were fine, they're actually fueling the rise of their biggest rival by giving them the technology that they need to get ahead. So the US decides that they've got to do something. China's ahead on these missiles, and they might get ahead on things like AI, and they're doing it with our tech. No more free trade, no more free markets. The government is jumping back into the chip game to sort this out.
Fundamental change is taking place today, politically, economically, and technologically.
All right, Joe Biden's like rolling up his sleeves. He's like, what do we do here? Step one, cut them off. No more chips for China.
The Biden administration published a large set of export controls on Friday in order to slow Beijing's technological and military advances.
The restrictions will limit Chinese companies' access to advanced computer chips.
Lowe's knows that when you get more savings, you get a lot more summer with deals to kick off new projects.
Habakkuk 2:3. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it shall surely come, it will not tarry. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright within in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Yeah, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a very proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto himself all nations, and heapeth upon himself all people. He transgresses by wine, the philosophy. He sees the wine between the communism and the nationalism. He gets in between it. He sees Japan with the micro ips, cuts them off. He ain't keeping them at home. So he uses a different wine to subdue the straw man, to subdue China. So he could spoil Taiwan. He'll go between any country. He'll go between any people. He'll go between any nation. He will split them between ideology. So he could spoil. Technically, you'd be spoiling both sides. We'll keep it not at home. His desire as hell, man. He keep enlarging it, man. If you're gonna cut him off, cut him off. But as long as he's at the top of the food chain, as long as by traffic, the merchants, the desire as hell, man. He is his death, man, because it's gonna lead to them, the nuclear weapons. The 200 million ICBM warheads that gonna take them out, which cannot be satisfied. You know, he gathered himself all people. If you want to cut him off, cut him off. He gathered upon him all people. Oh, he gathered unto him all nations, and he put unto him all people. You know. Habakkuk says, and shall not all these take a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, saying, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long to him that laden himself with thick clay? You know, with all this debt. Thinking, you don't think it's not gonna take a parable against you? You know, you cut nations off and still selling and using their enemies to sell back to them. That's gonna be a proverb against him, man. Esau really, he's building the enemy's ability for World War III. They shall not rise up suddenly. Shall they not rise up suddenly? That shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee. Thou shalt be a booty for them. These people are going to spoil the nations, man, because they're being spoiled. They're being limited. They're paying tribute. Thou, you know, they're trying to take over this nation. They're paying tribute, and Taiwan's paying tribute to them. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, and all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee because of men's blood, for the violence of the land and the city and all that dwell therein. You know, especially the remnant of the people, because he'll go in there after after they've been through some big war, big atrocities, and they'll go split them up. So these people gonna spoil you. Woe to him that coveteth with an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high. And that's what he's doing, man. You saw that pattern, that United States, Taiwan, he's setting his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. That
And here we are back in the fun bureaucratic paperwork. Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security, docket number 220930-0204, RIN 0674. Certain advanced computing and semiconductor manufacturing items, supercomputers, and semiconductor end use. Entity list modification. I'm not going to go through this. This is just a bunch of rules that says no more chips to China. All those cutting edge chips that China was buying from US companies, blocked.
The restrictions will limit Chinese companies' access to advanced computer chips.
Manufacturing equipment they need to make their own chips, blocked. All that US made vital software that Chinese companies need to design their own chips, block, block, block.
We will bring these jobs back to our shores and end our dependence on foreign chips.
In fact, the Biden administration went super far to say that any company globally that uses US tech to produce chips is now blocked from doing business with Chinese firms.
To cut China off from certain semiconductor chips made anywhere in the world with US equipment.
Why stop there? Americans are now forbidden from working for Chinese chip companies. This is huge news. This is huge news. This is happening. This is we're in the middle of this right now. But let's go back to that visual of the whole supply chain. If you cut off this, then yeah, you hurt China, but you also hurt the other side of this line, US chip makers. One example, this US chip maker, NVIDIA. They went from selling tons of chips to China to suddenly being banned from doing so. This has led to a $400 million loss in revenue in just one quarter. Poof, up in smoke. One of the biggest chip makers now totally cut off from their big customer because Joe Biden is afraid of the Chinese military, and for good reason, which leads to step 2 of this policy. The Biden administration wasn't going to leave these tech companies out dry, so they gave billions of dollars to American chip makers to say, hey, yeah, sorry we cut you off from your main customer because we're kind of getting scared of their military, but we have to protect our chips. Here's a bunch of money. Congress passed the CHIPS Act, which gives billions of dollars to these companies to create fabs back in the United States.
This time it wasn't Russia, but China, another rival power, would get way ahead of us if we didn't pull out all the stops. And this legislation is the first large step in pulling out all of those stops.
The government wants the fabs to come home to ensure that this most valuable technology isn't solely reliant on outside countries. And we're talking giant payouts. 50 billion taxpayer dollars go to companies like Intel, which is now opening a new fab in Ohio.
We are going to build the most advanced stuff in the world right here in Ohio.
Or even TSMC themselves, which is based in Taiwan, but is now opening a new fab in Arizona. Keep it in the family. Okay, so this is economic war, and the Biden administration just did a huge move. Reminder that the reason why this is important is because it's not just about business or even missiles. This is about chips. Chips are not just chips. Chips are the future. Chips are power. Yes, chips mean economic growth and new cool technology, but chips also mean new weapons. Chips are the currency of geopolitical power, kind of like what oil used to be, but now it's freaking silicon with a bunch of on and off switches on it. The US is taking control of its valuable resource and cutting China off. So the US makes this big move.
And who they worship? God, guns, oil, drugs. But no, It's at the end. See, the vision will tarry. So, but it surely shall not tarry. It surely will come and not tarry. It's not tarrying. No, it's straight to it's cut all to the chase. It's the micro. What was I say myself? It's the silicon.
Cuts China.
See, it's specifically, they're competing because they want a 19th century structure. These people they vying for power as more independent states. So they're all with the monetary class, trying to get the best deal at the war, the economic reset,
And that, this is geopolitical conflict. They just made the move. The ball's in China's court now. How will they respond? And this is where Taiwan comes back into the picture. Taiwan, this small country that finds itself in the crossfires of this conflict. 92% of all advanced chips are made here, mostly by TSMC. The US is totally reliant on them. A few months before the Biden administration was doing all of this, making it illegal to
Ezekiel 28:2, Son of man, saith unto the prince of Tyrus, at the time, it's him, thus saith, but, look at all this witchcraft. All this is all nothing is new, man. All this is old technology. You could see, they're just dealing with ancient technologies. Dealing with, and therms. Dealing with Black Mirrors types. Dealing with, it's kind of like dealing with the, the balls that that witch is beating. It's kind of not new. But thus saith the Lord, BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am power. I shall sit in the seat of power. And what he said, power is now the micro. That's power. That's geopolitical power. I'll sit in the seat. I'll sit in the seat, saying that I am God. I'll sit in the seat of God. In the midst of the seas, in the midst of the people, yet thou art a man, and not God, though thou settest thine heart as God, or that is as power, man. I thought that, not thought that he's sitting in the seat of power, that them chips, man. He would be able to just control dominion over, like prophecy doesn't have dominion over everyone, like the Lord. Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel, no secret that they can hide from thee. Man, don't talk to no bug out about this verse. So you think you're wiser than Daniel, and you're not trying to be. You're saying yes, but not being pretentious. You're saying we have more understanding than Daniel. Than like if Daniel, of course, Daniel has more understanding than me at this time. He's reincarnated, he's preaching, but at this time we have more understanding than Daniel. Because through the prophecies, we're lived it. We're living it, man. These prophecies break down. These people got, they received it. They didn't have their full understanding. That's why we gotta be grateful, man. The truth is really for now. That we could receive that 100% doctrine. With thine wisdom and thine understanding has gotten thee riches, and has gotten thee gold and silver into the treasure. By great wisdom and my traffic thou hast increased thy riches, and thy heart is lifted up because of thy riches. So now they think, we got all these riches. We got all these riches from China. We could just cut them off and we could rebuild ours. That's how much of his riches lifted up his heart, man. That he think he can outdo prophecy. It's too late. Therefore, thus saith the Lord. No, it's funny. These people are way better than they are, man. Because they're not playing no games like Evil E. They gonna get straight to the microchips. They ain't playing no fantasy game. These people think, America will never get in. America gonna be here. World War III, World War IV, World War V. No, this is not. These countries, they don't have the luxury that America does. ICBMs. That's all they plan. Now their ICBMs way due out in America. Then these countries are what? I forget the number. 10 years behind, maybe 5 years. These countries are not gonna wait to go be in slavery. The evil E. Thus saith the Lord, AHBAD Babal, thy power, because thou hast set thine heart as power. Behold, therefore, I will bring thy stranger upon thee, the terrible of thy nations, and they shall come and draw their sword against the beauty of thy wisdom, and they shall devour thy brightness. See, they don't follow the beauty of the wisdom. We got all the microchips. We got all these and everything, right? We got all that and everything. We make our life amazing. But he gonna bring the nations. They gonna take them on. All the beauty of all these, these silicons, gonna be reduced for the micro to be made a weapon. To get rid of evil E. They shall bring thee down to the pit, and thou shalt die the death of them that are slain in the midst of the seas. Thou wilt thou say before him that slayeth thee, I am God, but thou shalt be a man and no God in the hands of him that slayeth him. Let me saw. I mean, they're gonna let me saw. It's America thing, they're disgusted. It ain't gonna mean nothing. Thou shalt die the death of the uncircumcised by the strangers, for I have spoken, as saith the Lord.
Chips to China, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, not just to shake hands with political leaders, no. She was there to visit TSMC, the chip fab. What Pelosi was really doing here was signaling to Taiwan that they are vital to American security. The US relies on this, and will protect it.
Came to Taiwan to make unequivocally clear we will not abandon our commitment to Taiwan, and we are proud of our enduring friendship.
And in doing so, she shows us what China's countermove might be in all of this. It might be Taiwan.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes, that's a commitment we made.
Okay, but wait, what this doesn't mean is China's going to invade Taiwan and take all the chips or take over the fab or something. That scenario doesn't make any sense. If China invaded Taiwan, all they would find is a bunch of empty fabs if they weren't bombed already. They wouldn't know how to operate them. They wouldn't have all of the engineers and software and all of the supply chain stuff that they would need to actually make chips. They would likely be fighting a war, and the US would probably get involved. I made a whole video about it. You can go check it out. Anyway, the effective countermove here for China would be to operate right on the edge of active warfare, to strike back at the US without provoking a military response. This is how big nuclear powers do it. They don't actually clash. They want to just sort of poke at each other. One scenario would be China sending a bunch of its Navy ships to set up in the ocean right around here, creating a kind of partial blockade. They could stop cargo ships that are coming to and from the island, kind of just slowing everything down, but really holding the silicon hostage, making it hard for the supply chain to actually work. I mean, just remember the COVID-19 chip shortage or supply chain shortage or even the Suez Canal blockage from a couple years ago. Imagine those supply chain issues, but on steroids, totally debilitating and being used for a hostile purpose to strike back at the US. Like Biden forbidding American companies to sell chips to China, the blockade would be a way to strike at your nuclear-armed rival without going too far, without risking too much escalation or a miscalculation.
But when they want to go to war, man. Ezekiel 28:16, by the multitude of thy merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence, man. And this is going to escalate. That's probably going to happen. It's probably going to escalate. Once it escalated, it's out of here. And thou ascend, therefore, I will cast thee as profane out the mountain of AHBAD, and will destroy thee, O covered cherub, in the midst of the stones of fire. They're gonna have the nukes. They're gonna have the nukes pointing at America. They're gonna have them pointing at Israel. They're gonna have them pointing at the, London at the financial system.
It's incumbent upon us to stay number one.
To lead the world in future industries and protect our national security.
We are going to build the most advanced stuff in the world.
That's where we're at. We're in the middle of another economic war between big nuclear powers. We don't know what happens next, but one thing that feels clear to me is that
Thine heart was lifted up because of the beauty Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom. See, what seems beautiful about this life really destroys life, makes it worse, man. It's not the simplicity, just like, the sons of Cain, man. They're coming of a way that destroys the simple beauty that the Lord created. Which seems like beauty, but it's really just, it's a way that destroys life, has corrupted, thy wisdom by the reason of thy brightness, man. For what's wise, they change for what looks shiny, what looks cool. I will cast thee to the ground, and I will lay thy kings that they may behold thee. Thou hast defiled my sanctuaries by the multitude of iniquities, and by the iniquity of thy traffic, all the wickedness through their traffic, man. Children, people, these ips. Look at they're creating all these ips, to implant and cut everybody off from the covenant of the Lord and make the Lord never return. Cut all the Israelites from the covenant of the Lord. Therefore will I bring forth a fire from the midst of thee, and it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. So you're going to have to blow them out, man. You're going to have to cut them off with these nukes. And we see, man, it was by his traffic. His heart was lifted up. He built up his enemy. And now he think, just by he got his money. It's not too late. and all they that know thee among the people shall be astonished at thee. Thou shalt be a terror, and shalt thou be any more.
The most advanced stuff in the world.
That's where we're at. We're in the middle of another economic war between big nuclear powers. We don't know what happens next, but one thing that feels clear to me is that Cold War vibes are back, as these two great powers with different ideologies about the world compete with each other. This fight over chips will...
The noise of the multitude in the mountains in the government, like as of a people, a tumultuous noise of kingdoms, of nations, gathered together. The Lord Yahawah of hosts, of armies, mustereth the hosts, the troops of battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even as the Lord Yahawah, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. I mean, them people about to meet all Shanja. He demon-like power. That's what the people are about to meet. Therefore shall all his hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt, and they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travail. They shall be amazed one at another with their faces, and their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel, both with wrath and fury, anger, to lay the land desolate, and they shall destroy the sinners therefore out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not get their light. The nuclear ash is going to block out the stars and the sun. They shall not get the sun shall be darkened when it comes forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and it will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and to lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man, elect man, more precious than the fine gold, even as the golden wedge of Ophir. And anything that's not of a precious metal will burn in fire. The elect man is just going to be made perfect. It's going to purge away his leaven. And it shall be as a chaste roe, as a sheep that is not taken up, that every man shall turn to his own people and free way to his own land. And at the end of the day, man, Taiwan ain't going to turn on Taiwan. They're going to be dealing with Moab. All these countries, man, they're going to put aside their differences, to deal with America. But it's mainly talking about their people, going back to their countries, Even one that is found shall be thrust through, Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword, and their children shall also be dashed into pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, their wives ravished. And behold, I will stir up the Medes, talking about Russia, against them, and they shall not regard silver. And as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows shall also dash young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of their womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of Chaldees' excellency, shall be as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And it shall never be inhabited, neither shall it dwell in from generation to generation, neither shall Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their folds there. But the wild beast, that's all America gonna be. It's gonna be land no one dwell in, just wild beast. And the wild beast of the desert shall lie there. And the houses, after the fire dies down, their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and the owls shall dwell there. And the satyr shall dance there, and the wild beasts of the island shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces, for her time is near, her days shall not be prolonged.
Continue. And this idea in international relations that I kind of took for granted, which is that like globalization and interdependence is good and will lead to less conflict, it's being seriously challenged. Economic
Revelation 19:20, and the beast was taken, and the false prophet, and the miracles, and wrought the miracles before him, which deceiveth them that had received the mark, and them that worshipped his image. These were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone.
Interdependence is being used as a weapon. That's what we're seeing here. And not just here. I made a video a couple months ago about how Vladimir Putin is cutting off natural gas to Europe. Frankly, it's not that much different than Joe Biden cutting off microchips to China. I mean, it is different in a lot of ways, blah, 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 we get it. But like the big mechanics of how this conflict is playing out is peculiar and is becoming a part of how conflict looks today. So even
and they're all making, they're all rushing for, for the nukes, man, and to get their best bet out the new world order. They're trying to chip their populations. So either no matter where you go, man, all these countries, man, they want the chips, man. So wherever you lean, there's gonna be pressure onto you. And lo, thou trusteth in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh the king of Egypt, and all that trust in him.
as this old school style war continues to rage in Ukraine, we're seeing an evolution of how conflict works in our world. Where once a lot of conflict revolved around natural resources, like oil most recently, the currency of power, we've moved to an era where a magical piece of metal-like substance called silicon, pulsing ones and zeros, is kind of the new oil, the new currency of power, the new thing that we should protect to protect our military supremacy. So in a big shift of the trend of globalization, countries are now turning inward to
and behold, another beast up out the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, talking about America, like a lamb, coming peaceful with his two-party system, but he spake as a dragon, our fire destroys. He has all the power of the first beast. Before him, he causeth earth and them that dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, man. So he got you worshiping the Greco-Roman system. He's exercising all that violence, the military conquering, meddling upon people's affairs, making people worship that Greco-Roman image, and he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire to come down from heaven in the sight, to come down from heaven onto earth in the sight of men. And after the atomic bomb on Japan, he really had these nations worshiping him, able to reform nations, to form countries. Even Russia was a superpower when they didn't have the atomic bomb. America did their best to cut him out the deal. Indulge in all the spoils of the Edomite blessing to themselves. Of the beast, of the blessing of the beast. That's what I mean. They're Edomites, but they're not part of the beast, the Russians, the Soviets. and deceiveth them that dwell on earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on earth that they should make an image unto the beast, which had a wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast shall both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image should be killed. He calls all rich and poor, free and bond. He called all small and great, rich and poor, free and bond to receive a mark in their hands or their foreheads. No man shall buy or sell, save that he had the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, which is 600, and 6 score, which is 600, 6 score, and 6. 600, 60, 6 score, 6. 3 score, so 320, so that's a 60, and then a 6.
Protect their stuff, leading to a new era of distrust, severed connection, and rising tensions. Okay. Semiconductors is over. That's it. I'm now going to eat a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup from Trader Joe's. Wow, it's good. Okay, that's the end of the video. Thanks to Scalar one more time for sponsoring this video. There's a link in the description that gets you on a free class if you want to try that out. I have a couple things I want to tell you about. This is made. There's a big team of machine. That video goes live every month, and it's available to people who are members of the newsroom, which is what we call our Patreon. I just like to call it the newsroom because it's like
that pill, if you want to call it that, intelligent pill, at the time was already small enough by then to implant under the skin with a horse needle, a large hypodermic needle. And I was shown these, and they worked. And we could read them with a primitive hand wand type reader from about 7 or 8 feet away. And this was still primitive technology. Excuse me. Now, at the time in the security industry, a lot of us had a lot of concerns about tracking and locating people that had been kidnapped, particularly what was going on in Europe at the time, where we were having NATO officers, even the Prime Minister of Italy, kidnapped. And these people were drained, or they were brutalized, or both. And one of the goals of the industry was to develop technology that would allow us to track these people or locate them quickly, hopefully to save their lives, but on a secondary basis to keep from being drained of sensitive information. And I brought this technology to a meeting in a skiff room in Virginia that was arranged by a friend of mine with the CIA and another friend of mine with the State Department at the time to introduce this technology to what we felt at the time were the right parties to use this kilometers in space. Our government, and probably even the Russian government, and the Chinese, their politics to them, as we know it, is not the same. And they have agendas totally unlike what our governments, we perceive our government's agendas really are. And that they are able to track unbelievably what's going on around them at a minute level. And who these people are, my friends and I have given them names, but they have no relevance.
Repeat the video, man, but these people already got billions made. They're really coming to every citizen. That's their intent. Just like with the people say the numbers aren't possible, but just like with the Divock 91 Divock shot, look how many people got there. It's just billions. So if they could create those, and those are very difficult to transport, the temperature, all the J&Js, they're not in America anymore. They're expired. They aren't aren't available in America anymore. So they clearly get everyone, and they're going to war for it. So I hope this lesson was edifying. Barak Yahawah, Barak Yahawashai, Barak Yahawah, Barak Yahawashai. Go watch that lesson, man. They got millions. They got billions. They got billions.